In this video, we're going to go over the libero position. We're only going to use the libero position with our 7th graders. It's a relatively new position in that it's only 20 years old, and in relation to how old volleyball is, that would be new. But unless you've played more competitive ball, a lot of people are not familiar with the position. So I'm going to go over it. So let's go ahead and we'll get started. Let's start with the very basics of volleyball. You have 6 players on the court. The positions start at the server's position at 1 and go counterclockwise around the court till you get to 6. Now, skills that you want in the front row are the ability to hit the ball, to block, and to set. Skills that are very useful in the back row are playing defense, to pass the ball to the setter. So ideally, it would be nice to have a player that is an awesome front row player and an awesome back row player. But usually coaches, in order to get the best from all groups, they sub out their players on the front row and the back row. And how they would do it would be they would have your players that are better suited for the front row, and then we'd have players that were better suited in the back row. And when a player that was better suited to the front row rotated around to the back row, the coach would just sub them out. And that position that would take over the back row became known as a defensive specialist. And normally the defensive specialist would play across the entire back row. And then when it was time for them to go back up to the front row or position number 4, they would sub out. And the player that played in the front row would come back in to play the front row. Now, this worked really well, but you ended up with a lot of players on your team, and people started pushing for a player that could play the entire back row multiple times. And that's when they came up with the libero. And what the libero would do is they wouldn't sub in, they would do what they called a replacement. And they would just go straight in to the back row and take over for a position in the back row. This has to be done between the whistle for a dead ball and the whistle for a serve. So after the point's over and the ball hits the ground or something causes the whistle to be blown to call the ball dead, and that would be the beginning point where the libero could come in on the court. And they have to come in the court and replace their player before they whistle for a new serve. So once the liberos come in and replace the person in the back row, they would stay in for the entire back row like the defensive specialist did. And also like the defensive specialist would do, when it's time to go to the front row, they'll get replaced. However, unlike the defensive specialist, it's not a substitution. So they don't need to check in with the scorer's table, and they exit and enter in the back of the court instead of in the front of the court. And then the other thing that's unlike the defensive specialist is that after coming out of the game, they wait one volley. So that's just basically until we lose the serve. Once we've lost the serve, they come right back in for the player that's in the server's position. And then they would play across the back row again. And this is how the libero position was started. They didn't let the libero serve because they were afraid that people would abuse the ability to keep putting your libero in, and so the libero would end up serving the majority of the game. They would only have to sit out for one serve, and then they come back. And they figured that would be unfair. Well, as time went by, what people saw as unfair was that while height can help you attack the ball in the front row and it can help you block in the front row, it really has no bearing on your ability to serve, and a lot of your better servers were also some of your best defensive players. And so you had a lot of players that were having to pick between being an asset to the team as a good server or being an asset to the team as a very good defensive player. So they eventually changed the rule to allow the libero to serve, and they tweaked it this way. They designate one of the players as the person that the libero can serve for. So the libero is able to serve for one player or one rotation on the floor. So this is how it would work. Libero would go ahead and play across the back row. And once the libero gets to the position number 5 and get ready to go to the front row in position number 4, this is what would happen if they went really slow and made sure everybody stopped everywhere they needed to stop. The whole team would rotate. The player that was getting ready to serve would come out of the game. The libero would go back to the server's position, and the player that the libero replaced originally would run in and take over the front position. This is how it looks normally. So at this position, the libero is actually able to serve, and this is the only person that the libero can serve for. Either the libero or the person they replace can serve. You can, as the game goes off, you realize that your libero is having an off game, and the person that they've been replacing is actually having a pretty good serving game. You can go back. You can just have the person the libero replaces do the serving. So after this, then the libero would play across the back row again. However, this time they come out of the game because they can only serve for that one player. And then after we lose the serve again, the libero would come in and take over that person. And then they would rotate around, and by the time they rotate around, the person that the libero can replace to serve will be there, and then they can choose to either serve or wait until the serve's over to go in and play. So, what else about the libero is different than a normal volleyball player? Well, the rules that apply to the libero have a lot to do with the actual volleyball and its position in accordance to the net. So the first question is, can the libero attack the ball? Because the libero doesn't play the front row, and the typical rule is if you're on the back row, you can't attack the ball in front of the 10-foot line. Actually, the rule is you can't attack it above the level of the net, but we're going to you'll kind of get my feeling on that as we go with the libero. But your back row players normally are free to attack the ball in the back of the court, but not in the front of the court. The libero is able to attack the ball anywhere on the court as long as the ball is below the top of the net. So, if the ball is not higher than the top of the net, the libero is welcome to attack it or hit the ball overhand. However, if the ball goes above the level of the net, the libero isn't allowed to hit it overhand anywhere on the court. Even if they're on the very back of the court and the ball is judged to be higher than the level of the net and the libero swings at it overhead, then they'll call it a dead ball. So the next question is the libero allowed to set the ball? Well, let's start this off with the simple part. The simple part is that if the libero is behind the 10-foot line, they are welcome to set the ball, period. However, if the libero is standing in front of the 10-foot line and the person that they set the ball to hits the ball while the ball is above the level of the net, then that's a dead ball. So, if the libero is in front of the 10-foot line and they set the ball, the player that attacks the ball has to wait till the ball drops below the top of the net. Now, that's the rules as it pertains to the USVBA. In order to make things simple in the YAADL, we're going to simply say that the libero isn't allowed to set in front of the 10-foot line. So what else makes the libero different? Well, the libero's uniform has to be a contrasting color to the rest of the team. So in our league, the YAADL, we're going to go with a white shirt. If the coach asks for a white shirt at the beginning of the season, I will provide them a libero shirt that's white that looks like all the rest of the shirts. If, as the season goes on, and the coach decides they want a libero shirt, they're welcome to use just a plain white shirt. It doesn't have to be a league shirt. Just a plain white shirt will work just the same. And on a side note, the shirt you see on your screen right now isn't necessarily the shirt we're going to use for the league this year. It's just one of a couple different ideas I have. I put all the ideas on our website. Yes, I know it's a shameless plug. Feel free to go to the website at T-Shirt Lab and pick out your favorite and vote for it, because whichever shirt gets the most votes will be the shirt we use during the league. So that concludes my video about the Libero. I hope you find it informative, and I hope it helps you understand what's going on this year. And I will see you at the next video.